IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I am Harshit Kukreja. I'm currently working as a research analyst in Takshashila. For today, we have Shrey Khanna, who is my colleague at Takshashila and works in the Indo-Pacific program. Hey Shrey, how are you?
I'm doing good, Harshit. Thank you.
So before we proceed, applications for Takshashila's public policy program are now open. The graduate certificate in public policy is a 3-month program. There are basically 3 streams from which you can choose: defense and foreign affairs, tech and policy, and advanced public policy. You can visit our website for more information. So Shrey and I were having a talk about Pakistan and Afghanistan, and Shrey is kind of our in-house expert on this. So today we'll talk about the Tehreek-e-Taliban and Pakistan, Afghanistan, and what this means for the global order. So Shrey, what explains the rise of attacks in Pakistan? Taliban? I thought Taliban and Pakistan were kind of allies. I think the attacks has risen post the Taliban victory. And from my viewpoint, from my understanding, as I had always thought that a Taliban victory in Afghanistan would be good for Pakistan. So what went wrong?
So, Harshit, there have been, increased terrorist attacks in Pakistan, including by TTP, largely by TTP, but there have been also attacks by Islamic State in Khorasan and Balochistan Liberation Army. So, the main issue of increase in terrorist attacks, particularly by TTP, is due to there is a chief of TTP, Nur Wali Masood. He has, consolidated several warring tribal factions which composed Pakistani Taliban, TTP. And this merger is going on since 2018. And there is a report by Pakistan Institute for Peace Studies, which said that in 2021, 207 terrorist attacks took place, which was an increase of 42% from previous year. And major part of these 207 terrorist attacks, they happened after Afghan Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan. And there was a ceasefire in December, and we'll talk about it. But in 1 month alone in January, there were 42 attacks. So this is the magnitude of those attacks. And
So-
even recently, yeah.
So Shrey, did Taliban and Pakistan had a fallout? We can call this a fallout, right?
Well, Pakistani Taliban and Afghan Taliban, you have to see them as two distinct entities.
No, I'm talking about. Oh, so there are 3
Yeah.
entities in this. There is
Yeah.
Pakistan, there is Pakistani Taliban, and Afghanistani Taliban, the OG.
Right. The guys who won against the US, they are Afghan Taliban. They are ruling in Kabul. Then there is Pakistani Taliban, which wants to, replicate the similar thing in Pakistan. And then there is ISI and Pakistan's military establishment. So what I was saying was last week, there have been, attacks in North and South Waziristan. There have been attacks in Kurram Agency, Mohammed Agency, also in cities of Bannu and Kohat. And this is just last week. And Pakistani Taliban has announced its beginning of its spring offensive, which they are calling it Operation Al-Badr. And it will include everything from martyrdom attacks, ambush attack, assassinations, sniper attacks on Pakistani forces.
So,
So,
do they decrease their attacks in winter, or
Yeah.
is it because of the
because
weather?
winters are harsh, so there is a lull in fighting. Even during the Afghan war that was going on for more than 20 years, there used to be a slowdown in warfare during the December. January time, and then as March and April comes, then there is increase in fighting. So this is like a fighting season beginning from April.
Okay, the spring offensive sounds more like a HMN sale. HMN sale.
So even though there is political instability right now in Pakistan, and it will remain so because of all that is happening right now with Imran Khan, but TTP sees itself in a position to take advantage of this situation to pressurize Pakistan's security establishment. Now, about your point that what went wrong after Taliban's victory. So, as many of us know, that Taliban victory in August was celebrated in Pakistan. Imran Khan said they have broken the shackles of slavery, and there were pictures of ISI chief Faiz Hamid going to Kabul to impose an interim government in Afghanistan when there was factional fighting amongst the Afghan Taliban. And then the Pakistani allies in Afghan Taliban, Haqqani Network, which is a group distinct from Afghan Taliban. So it was helping Pakistan in a peace deal with TTP. Many of the areas, these border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan, especially in east of Afghanistan, they are the area of Lower Paktika. It's controlled by Haqqani Network, and in these areas, there is good deal of understanding between Haqqani Network and Pakistani Taliban. In fact, these groups have fought with each other against the Americans. So there was, intense pressure from
So,
China.
Shrey, is it the same Haqqani who got some ministerial position in the Afghan government?
Right, right. The same Sirajuddin Haqqani. So there was pressure from China because TTP is targeting China-Pakistan economic corridor projects in Pakistan. And with the mediation of Sirajuddin Haqqani, there was a, month-long ceasefire which was announced in November 2021. And Sirajuddin Haqqani is Minister for Interior Affairs. And he hosted many of these meetings between ISI and TTP in Afghanistan. And then there's a ceasefire which came about. However, what happened was Pakistan's refusal to release the top commanders of TTP ultimately led to the collapse of ceasefire by December. So it remained only for 1 month, and when it ended in December, there was increase in TTP attack. So now here the most contentious elements of TTP's demands, they have been groups' insistence that Sharia should be imposed in Pakistan. Second, they want a demerger of tribal areas from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. There was a merger that happened. So now they want those tribal areas to be made separate from the larger province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Shrey, are the TTP like ethnically, are they ethnic Pashtuns or are they like
Yeah.
different tribes?
No, no,
And
they are ethnically Pashtuns. They are even more, homogeneous than Afghan Taliban, because lately Afghan Taliban, when it was fighting Americans, it included in its ranks many Uzbeks and Tajiks who were fighting with the Pashtuns against the US. But in case of Pakistani Taliban, they are mostly from that tribal areas, those frontier agencies. And there are some foreigners who are looking for, refuge and just to fight a jihad. So they do include such foreigners from Central Asia, but it's mostly Pashtun, ethnic Pashtun.
uh,
So, yeah.
if Pakistan, from what I understood, is Pakistan is fighting the Pakistani Taliban. So
Right.
from where are the TTP getting funds and who is facilitating the flow of funds to them? The Afghan Taliban.
Well, there needs to be much research on this, but going by the increase in TTP activity, especially after Afghan Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan, there is a case that they are, and there have been reports also that they have started fundraising drives in Afghanistan to raise funds against the jihad against Pakistani army. And in fact, among the most contentious element of TTP's demand is not the Sharia in Pakistan. The Pakistani army is not likely to accept that, but it's the recent demand that they have made is to open a political office in a third country. Now, this thing mimics what Afghan Taliban did against the US when they opened a political office in Qatar, and then they negotiated with US from that political office. And I've written a research note on this for Takshila, in which I dealt with this extensively. So you can
Hashtag self-promotion.
Yes. But what I'm saying is that this insistence on opening a political office, it shows that how TTP draws immense confidence from the success of Afghan Taliban. And if they stick with this point that we want to open a political office so that we can, negotiate for our future and the future of Pakistan, which will be Talibanized, and this will be a important sticking point. Now, for Afghan Taliban, they have this problem that during the insurgency phase, they had maintained publicly a distance from TTP. They said that, we are two distinct entities. We are based in Afghanistan and TTP is based in Pakistan, though TTP was fighting against the US by crossing, border and staging attacks on the US forces and Afghan national forces. However, after its victory, Afghan Taliban has allowed the TTP to operate from Afghan territory. There is no doubt about that. And there have been, cross-border firings. In fact, in February, there were 5 soldiers, Pakistani soldiers, they were killed in KPK province from cross-border firing from Afghanistan. And what happened was that the statement released by the ISPR, it said that terrorists from inside Afghanistan, they crossed the international border and opened fire on Pakistani troops. And incidentally, it also condemned the use of Afghan soil by terrorists for activities against Pakistan. So, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Shrey, you were talking about cross-border incidents, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about.
Yeah.
So, how much claim does the Afghanistan Taliban lay on Pakistan? Do they want only the Pashtun areas, or do they want whole of Pakistan? And what do they consider as a viable border? They don't consider, I think, Durand line. They don't consider that as a acceptable border.
Right. So now the issue of TTP is an issue of a militant group against Pakistani state in which Afghan Taliban, it's a third party which is supporting Pakistani Taliban, and because of some conditions, it cannot go against it. It has also facilitated mediation thing between the two sides. But when we come to, Durand line, it is a bilateral issue between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay. So now the claim of Durand Line is that in 1893, British divided this region and they imposed this Durand Line. Now, the settlement that was made then, it includes, a significant chunk of what is now Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and also the Balochistan province up to Quetta. So there's a fairly, around 50% of Pakistan, if you go by the original partition. So according to that, the claim will be more than 50%. Right now, problem of Durand line is not that extensive, but only in Pashtun dominated areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So right now it's not that extensive. Maybe it will become extensive in future. Nobody knows because
So
these are not
Durand,
stated positions. Yeah.
so Durand line is not a sort of a very contentious issue between the Pakistan Taliban and Pakistan, but I think it is an issue between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yeah, when you study it, you can say it. But if you are looking at the situation as an observer, you should keep this in mind that Pakistani Taliban are Pashtun. Okay, they don't respect Durand line. Afghan Taliban are Pashtun. They don't believe in Durand line. And Afghan Taliban has started their Sharia implementation in Afghanistan. Same thing, Pakistani Taliban wants. So initially, the idea for Pakistan was that we'll do, strategic depth. We'll get strategic depth if we, and the idea of strategic depth essentially was that if we can, destabilize Afghanistan, there is no strong government in Afghanistan, then they will no, they'll no longer be, interested in or have energy for fighting a war for Durand line or making troubles on our western border. So was the thinking in Pakistan. And now what is happening is the Talibanization of Afghanistan is going on. And with TTP there, Durand line, it will become a less of an issue because there is now a danger of Talibanization of Pakistan. So there will be, greater Pashtunistan if TTP succeeds or if Afghan Taliban pushes its point on Durand line. In fact, in during 1996, they did not accept the Durand Line as well. Yeah.
So, Trey, I want to stop you for a second and we'll take a short break.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks to the founder of Radiance Clinic, Dr. Falguni Shah. She shares 3 must-do things for healthy and glowing skin. On The Longest Constitution, Priya delves into the state-wise regulation of trade, sale, and consumption of alcohol. On Tere Mere Raste, Keshav describes the serene 100-kilometer journey between Leh and the Lamayaru Monastery. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth shares 3 lessons we can learn from Hajime Isayama, the creator of the super hit anime show Attack on Titans. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk observe humanitarian corridors and their existence in times of war, both in the current and historical contexts. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you might be listening to us on. And do check us out on YouTube. We're building a whole bunch of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And we're also doing a small listener survey, which we would really appreciate your help with. It helps us kind of talk to advertisers. So you could go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It'll just take a couple of minutes and it would be really helpful to us. We do appreciate this. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance and the India Water Portal. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome, listeners, back to All Things Policy. So, we were with Shrey and we were talking about the Pakistan-Taliban. Shrey, continuing our earlier conversation. So, what exactly does the rise of, can I call it the rise of TTP? What exactly
Yeah.
does the rise of TTP mean for Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship?
Well, Pakistani Taliban has existed since at least 2007, and they have, from their high point of their, activity, Pakistan military, it launched large scale campaigns, military offensives against Pakistani Taliban. There was ISI activity there as well, and it succeeded in, dividing TTP because there are several tribal factions which unite, and they call themselves then Pakistani Taliban or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So ISI divided them and and this led to many Pakistani Taliban factions moving into Islamic State. But with this consolidation that is going on, TTP is now more united than ever. With this thing, the attacks will continue. Now, but even if TTP were not to be a problem, the Durand line is like, a structural problem which compounds with the problem of Pakistani Taliban. In fact, recently, I think in January, there was an interview by Afghan Taliban spokesperson who said fencing that is going on by Pakistan on Durand line, it tantamounts to dividing a nation. And the nation that he was talking about, a Pashtun nation. So this is the idea of Afghan Taliban, that we are the same nation and you are not allowed to fence this border. This is another thing that after the fall of Afghan Taliban, Pakistan military, it destroyed the existing border fence between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And in many places, this has been documented that Pakistan military went inside Afghanistan and established new border points. So that is also there.
So,
And
Pakistan is basically trying to grab more territory while
yeah,
Afghanistan was.
when Afghanistan was weak, they pushed their borders ahead into Afghanistan. For Afghan Taliban, at that time, they could not do anything. But right now, when they are feeling, they are feeling,
Stronger.
when they're negotiating, they will negotiate from a point of strength. Then this Durand line, it becomes a, nationalist thing for Afghan Taliban as well, because no government in Afghanistan can concede on such a colonial thing called Durand line. So this has been true of secular governments, the republic that was there, or the Taliban government which came in 96, or even now. They cannot concede on the question of Durand line. And for Pakistan, it is very big problem when Afghan Taliban says that it is an issue of whole nation and not the government. So the things are moving into that direction. Pakistan had thought that Haqqani network is there. Sirajuddin Haqqani is interior minister. So he will come in and safeguard Pakistan's interest. But there is a problem that with the rise of nationalism, Afghan nationalism, there will be a limit on Sirajuddin's own influence upon Pakistan's strategic fortunes in Afghanistan.
So, Shrey, is this not the same problem with all post-colonial borders, basically? Any border that the Europeans made in the global south and without taking into account the normal distribution of population and everything else, is this not the same problem everywhere? This is not specific to Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Yeah, so those colonial borders, they were part of what was called the Great Game in Central Asia that was going on. India's own problem with China, the claims of McMahon Line. You won't see that Indian government, even during the Republican times, when there was a Republic government in Afghanistan, Indian government going out and criticizing Pakistan's position on Durand Line, because then it opens up to the charge of the same thing with its border, the McMahon Line on its eastern front with China. So because from Indian point of view, this thing is settled now. Let's move ahead. Same thing with Pakistan. What says to Afghanistan that this thing is settled. They try to grab more of Afghanistan territory, which is not the case with India. We are losing our territory to China, but that what you're saying is that the disputed nature of those colonial borders. It is very true. Unless and then there are colonial borders between India and Pakistan as well. So in all throughout this region, the British rule, there is a problem. The boundary that they sketched it did not come from the interest of the people or that state particularly. It was to serve the interest of British imperialism, and so the boundary was very artificial, and it is not many of such colonial boundaries are not working, but they are in a working condition anymore.
So, continuing our discussion on India, so what does this mean? This Pakistan, Taliban, and Pakistan sort of fight mean for India for cross border terrorism and as India as a whole? Now, do we get a greater say in Afghanistan? Because Pakistan's position has maybe, I don't know, weakened.
Well, if you think from that point, then maybe, but India right now is not in a position to take advantage, even if there was opening. There is an opening, yes, but it's not in a position to take advantage of it. India lacks the resources on the ground to take advantage of that situation. Maybe in future it will change its position towards Afghan Taliban. And there are, just because they are fighting Pakistan, but that does not mean that India can, go to Afghan Taliban and make deal with them openly to counter Pakistan, because there are a lot of issues with Afghan Taliban. They run a regressive government, and without international recognition for Afghan Taliban, it will be very difficult for India to do that. And Afghan Taliban has, it has not only problems with Pakistan. There have been border clashes with Iran. They have, threatened Tajikistan as well. So what we call enforcing the red lines to its neighbors. Afghan Taliban is doing that. And in such circumstance, when there is no international recognition for Afghanistan, dealing with Taliban will be difficult for India, though there will be strategic opportunities in that region. As far as India's own problem is concerned, I think situation will remain more the same, because we have counter-insurgency tactics, our border management. It is good. It is not like that what was the situation in 90s. So, and there is danger. There is no doubts about it. There is danger that because much of the high-end weaponry that US left in Afghanistan, it will be used by TTP and against Pakistan, and eventually it will, come into the hand of Punjabi Taliban and make its way into Kashmir and to, use against Indian forces. So that is one danger that is there. But from where I see, I think unless and until Pakistan is in a position to, deal strongly with Pakistani Taliban, it cannot use that significant inventory of mujahideen that they used after Soviet invasion in the 90s, because they have their own problem. If they push terrorist Punjabi Taliban, they're because even the loyalty of Punjabi Taliban is with ISI, but it can, they can also fight with TTP. So until that problem is there, the danger is relatively less, but danger is there that those high-end arms, they will make their way into Kashmir, and then there will be problem for India. But what India can do right now is, especially in Afghanistan, it's quite less. We don't have resources on the ground to do any such, meaningful thing.
Yeah, so we don't have the strategic, we cannot take a strategic advantage right now. We don't have the requisite resources. Okay.
Right.
So,
And one more thing, India's interests, do they really lie in, with Afghanistan, Pakistan, or India should be thinking more about the Indo-Pacific or its challenges with China or its challenges in Indian Ocean? So that is also a strategic
but
prioritization by Indian state.
so Shrey, you'll have to think about your neighbors. There is no question about that. Obviously, you can give different importance to different regions or different issues, but you will have to think about your next door neighbors. You cannot not think about Pakistan and Afghanistan.
But Harshit, we have thought about Pakistan for quite some time now. We are thinking about them for generations, for decades. I think there's, even though I study Afghanistan, and I have studied Afghanistan and Pakistan, but India's major challenges lie in the Indo-Pacific and not in on its western border.
Yeah, true that. So thank you, Shrey, for being such a good guest and informing us all about these new developments. And I think Afghanistan, Pakistan was a little buried after the US withdrawal. So, do
Yes.
you have any closing comments? Do you want our listeners to have some more bit of information?
I think as Afghan Taliban will become more independent from Islamabad, because if you see, there have been recent meetings, especially one in China, where Afghanistan neighbors plus Russia, they were invited for talks, and China has said that it will look to give recognition to Afghan Taliban. And similarly, if you see, there has been improvement with a European Union. US has, also took back US Treasury, announced sanctions relief. This is mostly for humanitarian relief point of view. But if there is much more recognition for Afghan Taliban, then it will be more independent from Islamabad, because Islamabad is like a facilitator of Afghan Taliban with outside world. It was previously, now it is bit less. But if Afghan Taliban gains recognition, it will, act more independently from Islamabad, and then that will feed into the nationalist turn of Afghan Taliban, which will create further problem for Afghan Taliban relationship. So I think the ISI's decades of, jihadi investments, they are going to turn quite bad for Pakistan.
Yeah, that was, I think, quite a good assessment of the situation. So, thanks, Ray. And thank you, listeners, for bearing with us. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Harshit.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.
Working Monday to Friday glued to your chair making you feel dull? Worry not. Get your 5-minute weekly dose of travel around the world with Postcards from Nowhere. Join me every Thursday as I explore the strange, obscure, and fascinating parts of the world and bring out facets of travel you may not have thought of before. You can find us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.